All right, we can get started. Hey, everybody. I'm Jamal Rashad, and I am so pleased to have you all here for this conversation that we're about to have. Myself, Jonathan Chase, and Jerome Harris will be talking about this fabulous book, which is Wild, Wild, Wild West and the Haunting of the Seahorse. Before we start, I want to give a big thanks to Printed Matters for producing this conversation, and Capricious for producing this book. And yeah, let's get started. I'm going to begin with just going over some introductions of who's going to be here. And I'm going to start with the book, right? So Wild, Wild, Wild West and the Haunting of the Seahorse by Jonathan Lyndon Chase, published by Capricious, is a dual-sided publication of nonlinear storytelling that illustrates Black queer bodies moving through fluid states of love, grief, and desire. In the first book, Wild, Wild, Wild West, Chase tenderly sits with the passing of their late grandmother, paying tribute through their shared love of Black cowboys while grappling with their grief and understanding of self, queer community, and desire. Set within the gardens of a space station, the second book, Haunting of the Seahorse, explores being in love, desires to have a baby, and the great lengths one will go to protect these things. Outer space, luscious gardens, fight scenes, and intimate depictions of parenthood and romance intertwine to tell this complex and beautiful story. So the two gentlemen that I have with me, or the two people that I have with me today, are Jonathan Chase, who is the author of this book, and Jerome Harris, who collaborated with the graphic design. And I am going to start with Johnny's bio. Jonathan Lyndon Chase is an interdisciplinary artist, principally working in modes of painting, video, and sculpture, depicting Black queer love and community amid the backdrop of city streets and domestic spaces. Their second book with Capricious Publishing. This is their second book with Capricious Publishing. A debut book, Quiet Storm, was released in conjunction with Company Gallery in 2018. Chase was born in 1989 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where they currently live and work. Yay! Jerome Harris is a graphic designer, educator, writer, and curator. He holds an MFA from Yale University and a BA from Temple University. Harris is currently the design director at Housing Works. Right on. So how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for everybody who took the time to come out and enjoy the chat with us. Thank you, Annika and Capricious, Printed Matter, and thank you, Jerome and Jamie, for being a part of this. It really means a lot to me. So this feels really great.
Yeah, this is amazing. Shout out to Jonathan for making this amazing work and making this happen. And thank you everybody for coming through and listen to us chat about this book.
Yeah. This is gonna be good. I'm excited. I'm very excited because one, I love this book. You can tell by all the stickies that I have in it, if you can see. And it's good stuff. So I want to start with a introduction to the book, and maybe Jerome, you can talk a bit about the design of the physical book.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to do a little screen share just to talk about the cover in particular. Can everybody see this? Is this visible? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So when I walked into Capricious and I met Annika on the first day, she was like, Jerome, we're making a book. And she hands me a 3-ring binder with plastic sleeves and all of these drawings and some dried baby's breath flowers sometimes, and strips. It was just plastic sleeves of artwork and some objects. And she was like, we're gonna make this a book, a fat 3-ring binder. And I was like, okay, great. This is about to happen. And it was an amazing experience, just really sitting with Jonathan's work for this long and just going through each and every piece and kind of just like building this narrative out in the form of a book from this like loose 3-ring binder. But I want to talk about the type on the cover because I use handwriting a lot in my own graphic design work. But so people were like, "Oh, I love the type on the cover," and I was like, "I didn't do it." So it was actually Jonathan's partner, Will, who created these amazing like fantasy alphabets. And Annika was like, "Well, here are these, so you can do something with these if you like." And I was like, "Oh, hell yeah." So I just went through, scanned these, vectorized them, and kind of just mix and match my favorite characters. So on the cover, no characters repeat. Um, and you just get a little bit of everything, and it's amazing. It totally matches the energy of the spreads on the inside of the book. Also, I was told that there were 2 different narratives. So uh, it didn't make sense to be presented with a book project and make 2 separate books because they both had the same sentiment with two like or the same kind of passion and energy behind them, but with 2 different sentiments. One more about desire and one more about mourning. And so they kind of meet in the middle with these vellum pages, which is really nice. And then what else? I don't know. It was fun because me and Jonathan are really into video games and comic books. So some of the kind of formal moves they were making in the work, it was just really easy for me to pick up and be like, oh, maybe this should be like panels like a comic book, or maybe this should be like a full page, maybe this should be a full spread, and just kind of referencing that comic book nature, but a lot looser than it would normally be. And yeah, I mean, you guys can ask me more questions later, but that's basically the gist of the book. It's 2 books, and you can flip it upside down, read it one way, flip it the other way, and read the new story. And you get to the middle and you get some nice words from Jonathan. Yeah, that's it. All right.
Right on. Jonathan, so this is the second book that you have, right? The first one being Quiet Storm. What about this book was maybe different, or were there any specific challenges that you faced transitioning from the first book to the second book?
Yeah, like I'm multidisciplinary in like my practice. So I think about all the sort of ideas of like collage and multiple parts of the body and identity. So I was kind of used to kind of working in that mode. And with this one being sort of like more story driven, but I didn't want to be more linear. So I was really having lots of fun, but it was also really challenging, kind of pairing up opposites together. Soft, hard, sharp, smooth, tender, rough, these sort of things. So I wanted it to kind of have the feelings of the kind of spaces that I work with in my paintings, like domestic space, memory as a space, the flesh and the body having multiple landscapes and their interaction to the space around them. So it kind of ranges from like between the 2 stories, like something like Paranoia, which I was dealing with a lot. The passing of my grandma really opened up a lot of things for me, and I was experiencing different kind of sensations that I wasn't kind of it was all just sort of new to me in that way. So definitely balancing like this anxiety of horror with like this longing and kind of vulnerability, talking about even bodily fluids coming from the body.
Right on. So yeah, for people who have the book, you know this, and for people who are purchasing the book and haven't gotten it yet, it's 2 separate books. The first one is Wild 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 West, which deals with, it's a love letter. It's explained as a love letter to Jonathan's late grandmother. And one of the things that it begins with is these kind of 4 poles of grief, right? We talk about grief as a memory, grief as a dream, grief as depression, and grief as a love letter. All right, so we begin with those 4 designations. And I'm curious as to why those specific things popped up as the 4 kind of designations of grief for you.
I was as I was mentioning, like the sort of internal kind of energies and landscapes of our body, and like the sort of outward kind of things, like the way we present ourselves and like our mask, it made sense to me, sort of compositionally, the way that I was drawing them, to kind of have them go vertical, like sort of ascending or descending into like your emotions, like a pull, or kind of like the way that grief works is like very strange in relationship to like time and space. And I was learning a lot that, you know, there's grief really doesn't end, right? It, like, you kind of just learn to kind of grapple with it and grow and kind of go along with it. But I think it's kind of beautiful in that way. When you think of memories, those things sort of come and go at the same time, but they're never really gone.
Yeah, I really appreciate, one of the things I appreciate is the pages, I believe it's in the section, Grief is Depression, they become a little translucent, right? There's this different mood to each designation of grief. I know that in a video you were talking about the origins of this book being rooted in dreams that you were having, right? And particularly where they were dreams of your grandmother, dreams of Black cowboys, right?
Yeah. Around the time when she passed, like, she's from the South, originally migrated up here to North Philly when she was 16. And cowboys is sort of like this territory, like this thing that's kind of bringing me back to all of like these beautiful moments of my grandma. And then it's inspiring me to learn more about my history on like different levels, like my close family relationship. I'm learning more about the South. Learning more about movie cinema, like the history of like how to depict it and stuff like that. So a way through grappling with the grief, I think, was me going back to like those early memories, like me and my grandma like watching cowboys and TV westerns and stuff like that. And it was like a point of like healing, like this like sort of zone where my body could go to like a threshold and kind of like revisit those sort of things.
Thank you. Yeah. Something that also struck me, I referenced earlier how there was different maybe energy in different sections. And Jerome, you can, I'm going to ask this to both of you. Was there a difference in how you approached each section, or was there a conscious effort to approach each section differently in terms of how you designed it and what you decided went in it?
Well, as a designer, I just always want to tease out the kind of natural logic in any set of content that I receive. And this was like not like at first, I remember when I sat down with Annika, I was like, I don't get it. Like, I felt it, but I didn't like get it. So it took me like a couple of days really going through all the scans and figuring out how to make a audience understand what Jonathan is feeling through this set of work. And so there were these moments of when Jonathan had written grief as depression, grief as so-and-so. So I took these as just as a natural way to make chapters in the book. And they came at like pivotal points in the story. And then I was like, oh, there is a narrative here. It's like, I just gotta have to do my job. So as I made those chapter, those separators, and then you go into each the work in each section, and I was like doing the work for the audience so that you can easily digest the story, and also appreciate the work. So I had more of like the job as like a curator and like rationalizing the work in a way that an audience could easily digest it in a book, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Makes sense.
One of the like interesting things like for me is like there's text in like my paintings and my drawings, and working in like this closer relationship to like literature and poetry, which I love very much, has given me lots of opportunities to just play with like the sound of like the word. So I deal a lot with like the five senses, and in some cases like the sixth sense, like smell, gathering site. And when I'm thinking of kind of not dividing them up more so, but kind of trying to make kind of an order out of like the chaos, like the infantry of like my emotions. So that kind of went into like a material, like the buckets that I was using as a metaphor and actually using to like be in, because I moved into my grandma's bedroom after she died. It was, for me in that time, it made sense for me to be able to kind of get her in that way. And it was something that like that she just sort of did. I never really questioned it why. It is kind of, it was like a Southern thing. Like completely, you know, like right in her mind and everything, but it's just something that, a behavior that she did, it just coupled from metaphors for like expelling something from the body or waste, and like the bodily part of it too, like the depression and how it affects like your day-to-day life. Like it really just sort of I hadn't had a depressive spout like that probably in like a few years. Just quickly to mention, as we go along, for context, I was diagnosed bipolar in 2011 when I was an undergrad. So like the sort of extreme emotions and feelings and the things that are kind of semi-polarized or opposite or contradictory are some things that I was thinking about too. Like, what does a word that has a sound to it, like, are words like gendered? Are they not? Does it sound loud? Does it sound quiet? Does it sound angry? And kind of charging up these the way that I'm doing like the line weight with the drawings.
And I also wanted to talk about the text in general. Like there's a moment, or if you look at the cover, I'm like haunting. I like repeated the text. Like I repeated different characters just to like give you the idea of this ghost moving through. And also on the inside, this also made me think of something Jonathan did in the book where he was talking about a serpent or a snake, and and they drew the S over and over again. And so there were these moments when I had to think about the text as both something that's going to be like read and something that's also a piece of art at the same time. So how do you navigate that? In addition to, I was extracting the text off of different materials. So sometimes it was on yellow construction paper. Sometimes it was on reflective paper. So I was like, does the material being there make a difference or not? Sometimes it was on duct tape. So I'm like, maybe I should leave the texture of the duct tape there. And is that adding to the story or taking away? And so there was a lot of decisions there. So even thinking about the poetry while thinking about the aesthetics of the text, because it's not like typesetting, right? I'm not like in Adobe InDesign, like, adjusting a rag or something like this. I'm like literally vectorizing Jonathan's writing and then like repositioning it in a way that makes it beautiful and also like makes it legible to the audience at the same time. So yeah. I was trying to do Johnny some justice.
Like,
Yeah. So you guys are coming from like maybe two different spaces, right? Jonathan, you have this idea and experience, and Jerome, you get gifted and tasked with communicating those two things, right, to an audience. So what was the collaboration process like when you two were beginning to work together?
I think we were just playing Mortal Kombat.
We were just like nerding it up, just like play Mortal Kombat, just like actually like kind of talking. We had a few meetings with Annika and just kind of like we really just kind of like mutually side by side kind of were ping-ponging ideas back and forth and kind of having like a structure but don't lose kind of like flow to, okay, let's like even like within the text, like there's like a sort of element of sinister play, like something that's a little like you're going in and kind of knowing what you're doing, but then also like the ways that Jerome, you put like this ghost feeling, like this sort of like especially with the negative and positives of like the translations of the drawings. I don't know if we could pull an image of it up briefly, but how the sort of two worlds of the books colliding together, and then like the colors kind of like go into like these like binary, scary, locked in. There's only two options, and the inside of that space is terror. Then the outside of the literal spaceship, the stars and things bringing the landscapes into the body. Definitely, like I love how you responded to all of the textures, because the textures and things are so important. And like when I'm thinking about collage and the inherent history and the things that maybe a particular object, physical or maybe not so physical, kind of like goes through. Like Ghost, definitely the frosted kind of like cloudy pages like are one of my other favorite kind of moments too, because it changes the structure of the page, and then like the book itself kind of has like a flesh opposite feel from the coat, the jacket, which is like plastic, almost like a astronaut suit, or like armor, or like sailing body bag, scuba diving gear. Yeah, this is the monster. Yeah. So they're on this space station, and they're for one of the partners, their first time on kind of like a rocket ship or anything, and it was just recently my first on a plane. Around the time that she passed, I was dealing with like paranoia and all of these sort of like weird kind of things happening to like my cerebral and like my body kind of in and out states. Disassociation, which is common in like a lot of sort of like intense kind of moments. So this monster, right, you think of like horror movies, and like a lot of them are like haunted house things, and this is for me like terror of like the potential of having a baby, the kind of like attack on the domestic. And at times when you're in that fear, like you're isolated kind of like in like this bubble habitat that they're in, which is like the space station.
Yeah, there's something that I pick up in both of the books, is there's this connection and this kind of coupling of opposites in terms of emotion, right? So you have in the Wild 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 West section of it, you have these things that can be looked at as places of shame, right? You have buckets of piss, right? And then you kind of juxtapose them with these things that we historically look at with sort of reverence, right? Connection to a grandmother, the crucifix. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the space that all these feelings inhabit, right? What's the connection between, you know, shame and joy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that, because this book has a lot to do with like my personal relationship and story. But like so many people like in our community, like it's specifically the queer Black community, and like the issues surrounding like just violence on our bodies through this space that's supposed to be both nourishing and protecting the church, but at the same time, again, like it contradicts or it doesn't fit our bodies or desires or histories. So there's like this shame of like I was in the church, like I'm like a church boy. I was baptized at 16, which was like pretty late. And I was like the youngest member at my church. My church's name was Bold Spring Baptist Church. That was in North Philly, a little bit near the Temple area. Seems to be more. And for a long time, just going to church was just like a nightmare. You know, it's like, and then carrying all of that like in my body and how it kind of marinated and like did a lot of stuff to the way I perceived myself and the way I valued myself. And then my grandma, the year before her passing, I kind of like officially came out to her. So in many like interesting but like complex ways is like, I'm really grateful that we were able to sort of, in a way, I guess, like address the elephant in the room. Yeah, yeah. And we were fine and everything, but it definitely had to happen to kind of have like a vulnerable, open kind of conversation that she kind of always knew I was different, you know, and gay and whatnot. I think that's also what brought us together closer, but still like that complicated relationship with even how like we as a people have Christianity in our history now. I mean, the violence that it brings, like in those kind of ways, like colonization and things like that. And a lot of people can really relate to that, and that's when I think it starts expanding out less, sort of like about my like individual story, and all of the people who deal with like those sort of things.
Yeah, and I was it was coming onto this project was perfect for me because we had a lot of Jonathan and I had a lot of very similar experiences. I had just lost my grandmother as well to breast cancer, and we talked about that, and we talked about both coming out to our grandmothers. And my grandmother told me, she was like, well, I was kind of like ostracized and you know, attacked by the rest of my family. She told me, "Oh, don't worry, the devil's just trying to trick you." Like that was her response. And she was like, "I still love you." And then and then we moved on, and she never brought it up again. You know, and so we both had that similar experience. And same thing with the church too. That feeling of ostracization. So like me, as I was like as I was going about designing the book, like I really wanted to respect Jonathan's grandmother as if she was my own. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, right? We move from these very personal experiences into a larger audience, right? When we create, and in the way in which we are trying to heal ourselves, right, through art, then we enter into a larger audience. Do you, either one of you, feel any kind of responsibility or, I don't want to say pressure, but that's the word that pops into my head, when you are translating these stories?
I think like every artist in a way is like their own worst critic, like that kind of saying goes. So I always generally, because I'm anxious, always feel pressure, right? But for this one, it did come with like a certain pressure in terms of like wanting the sort of abstractness of what I did to both of our meanings to complement each other very well. I would describe that pressure as more as like anxiety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is so how I came across Jonathan's work was I was at the Ulysses bookstore in Philadelphia, and I saw A Quiet Storm, and I love the book. And I went on Facebook chat. I didn't know Jonathan, and I was like, I love your fucking work. You're amazing. And then like I don't know how many, like 3-4 years later, we ended up working on this together. So it was just like a natural just like, you know, connection. And then outside of that, like Jonathan does, like Jonathan's one of my Beyoncés in my head. Like Jonathan doesn't know. Well, now you know. And then but with that being said, like making this book was hard. Like I love Jonathan's work. It was just kind of like I don't want to fuck up. So I really like I don't know. This is like one of my favorite graphic design projects I've ever done in my life.
Oh my God, thank you so much. When we were like talking about it, the minute I saw your name, I was like, I don't care who else. I'm like, I want Jerome. Like, he's amazing. Like, I automatically knew. So thank you. It's been like really just like overall like really wonderful and exciting, and like taking each like project or sort of experiment or thing that you do, and then just like learning each time from it in so many ways. I think it's also a very fruitful thing that comes out of like books and art, and that's really nourished for the mind, body, and soul. Yeah.
And I think
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I didn't answer the question completely, but I feel like a lot of times, like when you take responsibility for something, you're trying, and I think trying implies a chance of failure. So I think that if you go about something just like authentically, then you can't fail. Like you're gonna impact the people you're supposed to. And if you try too hard, then you might miss. So
Right on. Thank you guys. And the last thing before we switch, I guess, to the second book, I wanted to talk about is let's talk about cowboys really quickly.
Yes.
Let's talk about cowboys because cowboys appear in Wild 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 West, right? And they appear in a variety of ways. They appear as this connection between Jonathan, you and your grandmother. They appear as this place, or this place where there's a need for decolonization, right?
Hmm.
They appear kind of as a homoerotic trope.
Hmm.
So aside, I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that, Jonathan. Aside from the connection between you and your grandmother, which is, I think, the anchor,
Hmm.
the decision to heavily include cowboys.
Like growing up, like really like liking them and stuff like that, and like my first really only introductions up until maybe what was it like uh Chuck Norris or something, Texas Ranger. There was like a black character in there who was like a cowboy, but before that, I had really no knowledge of like the sort of like history. It was like kind of confronting like the whitewashness of it. So like just kind of as I got older and kind of like getting, like more like a deeper look and like feeling into things, I just was like really frustrated. I was like, this is something that a lot of more people should know about. And I wanted to like to share that with everybody. In Strawberry Mansion, we have on Fletcher Street, our Cowboys. It's like a youth program, and a few artists have did like work on it before. There's like a show at Harlem, a street at Harlem Museum. I think Dana Lawson has a really well-known photograph, maybe about that. And I just outside of like sort of like the TV screen and stuff like that, like occasionally, like the first Black Cowboy I saw like in person, I was just riding on a bus, and I was at the time living, in North Philly, public trans, SEPTA, and I was just chilling. And I saw like a person on a cowboy hat, and like a horse, and I was like, whoa! But that person looks like me. So it was like really like cool and exciting. Like that kind of like ignited like just like that extended interest in it. And when I think about other times I would see them, like it would, I'm thinking about like the politics of the body and like the ways that we're viewed in like these lenses and things like, for example, like porn. In those cases, I would see them too, but under really weird white gazes with like what was happening. So that makes me think of like just like objectification, and like that's like one of the few depictions of Black cowboys that we might see circulated a lot. Yeah, yeah. So those were like some things I was like kind of thinking about in terms of like my growing knowledge of it and like my love for them, my frustration with just like how knowledge is being handled around it. And I just really want to add just more to like that canon of like information and image making, because I feel like too, like when you make work, it's also like a time capsule.
Absolutely, it's part of the decolonial process, right? And this act of reclamation. The second book, The Haunting of the Seahorse, is slightly different in tone, right? So we go from this very intimate space and loving space with this love letter to your grandmother, and then we go into this speculative future, right? And this couple that is going to do some work on a space station. Yes. And to start off, I want to ask you guys what do you see as being the importance. Jonathan, you and I talked about this before, like sci-fi, horror, people often judge them by their worst qualities. But I want to hear from you two about what is the potential of these genres in terms of conveying Black queer existence, right?
Yeah. Oh no, you go first, Jerome. I'm blabbing on. You go first.
I mean, I love video games. I love comic books, like Marvel in particular. And then I also, I think one of the first novels that was one of my favorite novels was A Wrinkle in Time. And then from there, I really dove into like fantasy a lot. Like Final Fantasy is my favorite video game series, and the most important thing about fantasy and sci-fi, like Fifth Element's like one of my favorite movies, The Matrix. But I receive so much more about life, like themes and society and government from fantasy stories like Attack on Titan, Neon Genesis, Evangelion. Like all these stories speak way more powerfully to me about the world that we live in than anything that emulates the actual world that we live in. And so as I'm like that, and that's why like as I was working on this book with Jonathan, it really spoke to me. You know, I really had that loss of my grandmother, and while I don't want kids, like I do know what it feels like to yearn and really deeply want a thing and know how much you would fight for it. But like it's so much more powerful when it's a thing that kind of does that you can't even see yourself in it. It's a thing that doesn't even include you, you know? It's a fantasy. And I think that the message comes through clear, and the themes come through clear with fantasy and fiction.
Something that you were saying, Jerome, that I'm not sure if anyone has like did like extensive work on, but like when I think about my first kind of like fantasy influences and stuff like that, like I was born in '89, so lived through the '90s. Like the Power Rangers were like huge a thing. There's a Black Ranger who was a Black character, and I think like earlier on, you know, it's like it was similar with the Cowboys, like our depictions of these things and like the mass media, how we see them. We don't see ourselves like often that much, and then like I mean, the intersectionally wise, like queer people too who are Black, like it gets this really like scarce in some ways, or the depictions are bad. But everybody I know watched Dragon Ball Z. It's like a staple, and Blackness's connection to that also reminds me of like Black exploitation films and like kung fu, and you know, just sort of like the power to see yourself in any sort of way or facet. To be like we're also complicated and multi-dimensional. Like we all have different worlds and stuff in us. And like honest. So I really think like when I think of like Samuel Delany, Octavia Butler, oh my gosh, who did
Samuel Delany?
He was I think also wrote a science fiction piece too, but like when I think of those people, then I also think of like people who are like doing horror, like Jordan Peele and stuff like that, and like the director of like Black Panther. Like you think of comics, and how, like probably the turn of the 2000s, like that's when they kind of like became mainstream. It was totally uncool, not like to like comics. Yeah, like it's. I think like the future definitely is like queer. Like I think, you know, it's like things become more free, more, you know, like more freer, more yourself, like the greater potential to like not be oppressed by violence. And when you're, you know, especially like thinking about like, oncoming generations and stuff like that, I think about, you know, all the times I didn't see myself in this way and what like my response to that was like what would have happened if I would have saw myself earlier on in like sort of different sort of like ways in like science fiction.
And I heard some gossip about Samuel Delany, but I got into Samuel Delany around grad school and was reading his Never Yawn series, and it's so like kinky. It's like I've never really gotten that energy from a sci-fi story, but it was kind of like as I'm like hooking up with guys on Grindr and stuff like this and reading his books, and I'm just kind of like, whoa, like there's dragons and mercenaries and swords and S&M. Like, well, okay, well, this is cool. So it's like also having this opportunity to, from, you know, also from a Black writer, right? Like having this opportunity to have this new drawing connections between your personal life and this fantasy world, you know, through these novels is pretty cool.
Yeah. There's this not tug of war, I don't want to use that term, but there is definitely this commentary on the Black queer experience through the use of sci-fi, right? And horror. Black queer bodies, maybe their proximity to horror in terms of how it may be viewed by the outside. I'm curious as to when you are designing a book, right? Because this the second book also, I told Johnny it kind of scared me when it was supposed to, and that's a good thing. So, what was your thought process like when you were designing that second book, Jerome?
That book had a lot more things to work with. So there were like pages with duct tape on it, and then there were like strips of paper that were typed out and cut out, and then so I'm like, I wasn't really sure how to convey the mood all the time. But then once I like went through all the materials and went through all the scans again and again, I really wanted to put the figures in a void, and so I made the pages black in general for the whole book, but like extracting them from the material and making all the lines white and putting them in this like black space. I think just as you flip from page to page and feel that and feel that energy again and again and again, especially on this like shiny paper, right? Because it feels a little futuristic. It does convey that mood. And a lot of times it's like hard to achieve that. So I was really like trying to massage the message, but like it was just, you know, that was one thing. Also, Jonathan's drawings did a lot of the work themselves. So sometimes I just needed to put extract it from the scanner bed and just put it on the page because I didn't need to do anything. And other times I would take, maybe if the narrative was really complex, I would take multiple drawings, extract them, and put them into like 4 quadrants or something like this, to make it feel more like a comic book or something like this, where the action is sequential in that way. So you're not getting the sequence by turning the page; you get the sequence by reading it, and then you can turn the page to a full spread. You know, so you get this dynamic experience as you're moving through the Seahorse story.
Yeah. So I want to remind everybody that I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go to the questions in the chat. So if anybody watching has specific questions, you can put them in the chat, and I will read them, and we will get some answers. But before that, the book, The Seahorse, opens up with the phrase, "I want to have a baby." And we have a reference to a seahorse, right? Which we know is a species in which the male carries the eggs and the eggs come out. Maybe something sinister happens to the seahorse afterwards. I don't like to think about that part. But the male has the baby. Jonathan, can you talk about, and we have these figures of a non-binary person carrying a baby throughout. So Jonathan, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. When I think about like an early question you asked me about sort of like how the two books connect, there's also the theme of like just death and birth, and future and past. So thinking of my future, and I've been with my partner since 2011. That's when we met. We got married in 2016, and just like continuing to grow and just kind of being really humbled by my own body and my mind, and like kind of like facing these sort of things I've been kind of thinking about and experiencing with this urge to give birth. This has been kind of with me for like the last like 3 years, like 2 years. Yeah. And just all of like my curiosity, but if it's sort of like possessed by like anxiety, which can turn into like paranoia, and just thinking of even in like our present situation, like going outside like isn't promised that you'll be alive, right? It's like very disturbing, like to just kind of think about your body in the blink of an eye being kind of eradicated due to like hatred and fear, homophobia, transphobia, all of that stuff. And the monster doesn't, one thing I think maybe kind of kills science fiction, or maybe some of the things that we see like in like some writing and like science fiction and horror stuff, is that I think it's like a byproduct of living in a future kind of computer mass information age. Everything has to be quick and it has to be easily digestible. So whether or not there is an explanation for the monster is kind of where I think that more kind of cerebral or cathartic kind of thinking kind of goes into like embedded in the medium of science fiction and horror, is kind of confronting being uncomfortable. And I deal with that every day. Just having different kind of relationships to my body really makes me like horror movies like The Thing, or like Candyman, or these sort of like Japanese horror movies where like the body is like sort of the site for where the horror takes place. Yeah, and definitely the domestic as that body, like a compounding space that's like something inside of something. And plants, the demon plant, bad seed, evil seed. Yeah. So kind of also thinking a little bit about again rooting it back to the Chihuahua West, like roots and soil and tainted land. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea of the body being the site of the multiple things, right? Of horror, and of like reclamation. I'm going to go to the first question, going off of what Jerome said earlier about the design. Could you talk more about the connection between desire and mourning, and how the connection of the two books depict two nuanced sides of love? Did you hear that? Hello?
Well, I'm supposed to answer, Jerome?
Yeah.
No, it was saying, I think they were just saying that they were going off of a comment you made, Jerome.
Oh.
I mean, I think that's also, I mean, maybe not worded as well as that, but I knew these are two really extreme feelings. So it kind of made sense to go together in one book, you know, and they're both kind of leading to this midpoint of just like extreme love of Jonathan's kind of thank yous to everyone, you know. And so you go from this like feeling of like mourning and misery and this like extreme desire and passion to fight for it, and then you get this like moment of you know, you get this realistic moment that's not at all abstract. It's just like words and kind gestures, I think just like looking at it both ways converging into this one moment in the middle, really, I don't know, it was really powerful. I mean, I made the thing effort, like I didn't really think about it that way until like after, like it's post rationalized, but like still it's a pretty cool gesture in general. Yeah.
Okay. Another question is, what pages, for both of you, what pages are you most proud of out of all the pages in the book?
I really love the ghosted pages, the transparent ones, and I'm really in love with the drawings I did of the one of the couple pregnant.
Hold on, let me try to pull those up. Let me see. See if I can screenshot. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Okay, this is my number one favorite spread in the whole book. As soon as I seen Missy Elliott, like I never even caught this, Jonathan. I never
Yeah.
even caught that she was being a cowboy in this moment.
Why
Like
just
and go yippee yi go. And I can't
or-
read the words without singing the song. And I'm just kind of like I'm imagining it like a GIF with sound, go yippee yi go. One side like got with the other materials and
this is in case
what?
people don't know, is this Missy Elliott from She's a Bitch music video?
Yes.
And it was such a quick moment.
Yeah, and like she's like just so
He's
for
like,
me an icon of like Afrofuturism or like science fiction and stuff. And I was like at the 90s.
Yeah, that was definitely a moment. Okay.
And I'm trying to find Jonathan's Prego drawings. There's one. This one? Yeah. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
This one I love.
Yeah, that one.
All right. You guys get it.
Thank you. So we have, I think, 2 or 3 more questions. One is, what made you include photography in Seahorse? Can you talk about the shared life energy of the plants and the pregnancy? And the person says they somehow felt related.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned a little bit about like how they were connecting through like soil and like the roots, like southern roots. My grandma from like the south. Regular horse, well, I shouldn't say regular horse, but land horse, water horse. So I use collage, like I guess live action, if you will, sort of slash assemblage, and like my practice in general. So those kind of things through my making of the material, the binder that was we were chatting about a little bit earlier. I compile all of my ideas and I archive them. Photographs, collages, notes, diary entries into like this one binder. Then that is translated into something approachable, digestible.
Gotcha. Sorry, I was going to the next question. So Jonathan's paintings often present male figures as bodies with a penetrative potential. For example, holes that suggest sexual submission. As the cultural stereotype of Black males promotes hypermasculinity, have these paintings met any resistance with their opposition standpoint and suggestion of a feminized body?
I would imagine, but if the question is also maybe has anyone ever approached me with it? No, but they can. Yeah, I understand I think I understand the question, but I paint from life, my everyday. These are my experiences, and not about those of white people or racists and stuff like that. My work doesn't kind of respond like in that kind of way to those things. It responds in like other ways. But no, I've never, nobody's ever said anything to me like that.
I mean, I'll just say as a gay man who has sex, it's just normal. Just
Right.
it's just like regular.
Exactly. It's just like, and yeah, I think that's all I can say about that. It's just regular. Well, not regular as in basic, but it's just like, yeah, life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Who do we create for? As artists who produce across a range of mediums, would it be within your wheelhouse to create a sci-fi horror film inspired by these narrative themes? have you ever thought about making a narrative film together?
I work in moving image. I'm just gonna say, you know, anything's possible. Yeah.
I mean, that would be fun. It would. I'm really into experimental motion and I wouldn't say film because I didn't study film, but like hell yeah, that would be fun as shit. Let's do it.
Yes.
Love it. And this one, oh no, I read that one. That was just in quotation marks. So what are you guys, what are your, I guess, hopes for the book, right? Since this is a book launch, what do you hope people get out of it? What do you hope it does?
I hope it can be like an object or like a site for reflection, healing, or just sort of maybe even being like emotionally messy wherever you're at now, because grief isn't structured that way. And I really hope that a lot of youth like turning like into like their next stage of their life, like they can have it in like their just like their library or like knowledge, so that maybe they won't feel alone, dangerous on a space station.
I mean, I feel like there are universal messages throughout the book period. Like if you're just reading the text and don't even look at the images, there's moments that are loose enough that you can apply them to your own life. So that's one part. I feel like you can find those moments of contradiction and tension and passion in there. And then the other part about it is it could be an entry point to a life that you've never lived. Like as we were just saying, like gay sex is regular, so why would I not emphasize my butthole, you know? But like for other people, like it's like, oh, a butthole, you know? It's like, so it's like you know, an entry point to like normalizing
Yeah.
it is like pleasure for somebody else that is not you. Yeah.
Yeah. You find your way back to parts of yourself maybe that are maybe a little traumatized or maybe like sort of like boarded up, or you know, just kind of like that kind of for self-reflection that can look like dismantling all of the projections that people have on our bodies and our psyches. Yeah.
Right. Do you guys see any kind of readings or book performances that could develop online in the future?
Sure, yes.
Right on. Well, I'd be excited for that. I really like that Quiet Storm had a live reading component to it. I guess in wrapping up, were you gonna say something, Johnny?
Oh, I was just saying thank you to the person's question.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone who asked questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So where can people find you guys or be in contact with you guys?
Just enter in my full name. It's my handle on Instagram. So Jonathan Lyndon Chase at Instagram.
My Instagram is not as simple as it's a long acronym. It's my name and GD for graphic design. Jerome JWHGD.CO, and that's also my website. Hold on, I should just type it in the chat. How about that? And you can just email me. It's jeromewharris@gmail.com. I'm not really using my Instagram right now because it's too much, but you can DM me, I'll respond.
Right on. Oh, last question was, is there anywhere to view the Quiet Storm reading, the live reading?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is there anywhere that folks can view the Quiet Storm live reading?
Yes. I would suggest putting in like an inquiry on Company Gallery's Instagram, and there's some like video stuff and recently there was like an audio animated video I made for Quiet Storm, so that should still be on there too.
Oh yeah, that's exciting. Right on. Well, I'm gonna say that I'm very happy that I've been able to kind of pick your brains about this book. I love this book, both of them, and it's been really great talking to you guys.
Thank you, Jamal.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jamal. Thank you, Jerome, and thank you everybody who
All
came
these
out.
J's.
Right, that's
Like,
the power letter.
Everyone be safe and spread love out there. Seriously, and thank you so much for coming out to just hear us talk about something we're putting out in the world.
Yep.
Right on.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.